Well, to politics now, where Donald Trump is increasing the rhetoric surrounding Hillary Clinton and her treatment of minority voters, at least as he sees it. During a speech last night in Mississippi, in fact, the GOP nominee called his opponent a bigot, and Clinton responded in kind in an interview a bit later.
Hillary Clinton is a bigot who sees people of color only as votes, not as human beings worthy of a better future. She's going to do nothing for African Americans. She's going to do nothing for the Hispanics. She's only going to take care of herself, her husband, her consultants, her donors. These are the people she cares about.
It reminds me of that great saying that Maya Angelou had, that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And Donald Trump has shown us who he is, and we ought to believe him. He is taking a hate movement mainstream. He's brought it into his campaign. He's bringing it to our communities and our country. I will have more to say about this tomorrow when I give a speech in Reno.
Kellyanne Conway is Donald Trump's campaign manager. Good enough to join us now here on set. Kellyanne, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Want to begin with a speech much ballyhooed to be given by Hillary Clinton in Nevada later today. She is expected to link Donald Trump to the alt-right movement, which she will be promoting as a hate movement. I wonder your campaign's response, at least at this point.
Well, I'm confounded why Hillary Clinton, who's running for president of the United States and really hides from the media, hides from the voters, has not held a press conference in 263 days and rarely even appears on a show like this, doesn't give speeches on policy. Why she's choosing this topic at a time when voters are telling pollsters, including in the CBS polling, that they want a conversation on health care, on education, on the economy and jobs, on energy, certainly on national security. Why is she, we're talking to the voters and she's talking about us. It's very odd, and I actually think it's unfair to the voters.
If you then are suggesting that you're discussing policy, substance, and I know that's been a push of yours since arriving to the campaign. Last night, however, we see Donald Trump call Hillary Clinton a bigot, plainly and simply. What examples are there of bigoted behavior by Hillary Clinton to which Donald Trump is referring? Well,
he, in previous speeches, I guess nobody noticed, he had said that the policies are bigoted, and he's saying the same thing. He's saying that if you are...
But those are two very different things.
But Josh, how many things has he called in a single day? And I think people are so inured to the fact that it somehow is acceptable to hurl these personal insults at Donald Trump, using really strong language that also is unprovable. And yet when he says it about her, it somehow qualifies as breaking news. She needs to defend, and she won't today, and nobody's going to ask her in the press because she doesn't respect you enough to have a press conference so that you can ask her. Yeah, but to ask her why she agrees with the policies that would extinguish charter schools and school choice, which are helping millions of African-American Hispanic students nationwide. How can she abide the
so
fact
that make her a bigot? Because that's what Donald Trump said last night.
And he said other things too. He gave policy speeches all week. He did it all last week. But we always want to hone in on that one word. Look, to your point, you just opened up this entire segment by saying she's giving a speech about him today. Mm-hmm. Let's see what word she calls him today, and then everybody's going to cover that as somehow quote responsibly covering it as breaking news. I don't think calling him names is breaking news. I think her telling us what the heck she would do with the disaster that has become Obamacare, what the heck she would do to cure the fact that 58% of African American youth are not working, to help us understand why millions more are in poverty now than when she and Obama took over. I mean, these are serious questions.
But you are saying again, I mean, this is to be called a bigot is a hateful and very personal insult.
Then she shouldn't call him that. And Elizabeth Warren shouldn't do it. And Joe Biden shouldn't do it. And Barack Obama shouldn't do it. And the whole Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia shouldn't have it as one of its themes.
We also saw him last night actually he finished that that sentence saying that she sees people of color only as votes, and that there should be competition for African American and Hispanic votes.
There should.
When we look at that NBC News poll out this week, we see, while he's doing a bit better than Mitt Romney was with African-American voters, 8%, as opposed to the 6% won by Mitt Romney, 22% of the fastest growing demographic and voting bloc in the nation. How do these numbers, Hispanics, how do these numbers speak to something that he believes can be made competitive?
Well, first of all, we need to compete. He deserves credit just for going there and showing up and raising these issues, because these past Republican presidential nominees haven't even dared, which I think is ignoring those communities in and of itself. And so he should get credit for showing up and at least trying to compete. But he's not going to get 50% of the African American vote this cycle. But if he goes there and he tells them, I hear you, and that I'm going to compete for your votes, and that if you think that the record and the numbers, the facts and figures in your communities are acceptable, then you ought to. He'd be the first person and me the second. You ought to vote for Hillary Clinton if you think this is acceptable. Many people do not think it's acceptable. And the fact is that we have to earn those votes. And when he goes out, I sat in the Hispanic Roundtable last week. It's been talked about in terms of immigration. That was a very small part of the conversation. I was there. They talked about national security. They talked about access to capital for small business formation and expansion. They raised the issue with him of how important home ownership is in the Hispanic community and what a very low default rate Hispanic Americans have with those home loans. They talked about national security, jobs, what to do with Obamacare, energy independence. It was a very far-reaching conversation, and we expect to continue to have that conversation over the next 2.5 months with all Americans. We would like to compete for all votes. You know, I've been a pollster for 28 years, and I object to folks looking at each other based on just race or ethnicity or age or gender or party affiliation. We have to have messages that at least appeal to all Americans, and that's what we're trying to do. I don't think a speech today about the alt-right appeals to all Americans.
But meanwhile, an absolute cornerstone of Donald Trump's campaign from the day he announced was the building of a wall. It also then became a wall that he was going to make Mexico pay for, and the use of a deportation force to remove upwards of 11 to 12 million undocumented immigrants from this country. It has seemed, though, since the meeting that you speak of with the advisory council, that there's been a softening on that stance.
There has not.
There has not.
There is not. In fact, he hasn't talked about deportation force since last November. So all the clips everybody's playing is from quite a while ago.
So there won't be a deportation force removing upwards of 11 to 12 million undocumented
Here's what there will be. And this is, again, thank you for the opportunity to tell America what his platform is, because we don't get that from the Clinton camp, and you certainly don't, because you're in the press and they don't respect you. No amnesty, no citizenship. Build the wall, have Mexico pay for it. No sanctuary cities, because Hillary is for sanctuary cities and catch and release, which leads to the deaths of innocent people like Kate Steinle, who was murdered in San Francisco in front of her father a year plus ago by a man who had been deported 5 times. What is he doing here? And then he also, Mr. Trump has also said he disagrees with Hillary on executive amnesty, on open borders.
But he's softened on that. He's saying now we're just going to go get the bad ones.
No, he's always said that. What he has said is you have to, if somebody's committed a crime. So do the good ones get to stay, and what makes somebody bad or good? Well, he has said if you've committed a crime, you're leaving. And a majority of Americans agree with that. The fact is, we don't even have a system in place in our current laws. They're not enforced. We don't have a system in place where you are expunging the bad ones, meaning those who have committed a crime, have been convicted of a crime. We don't even have a system now to let them go. Although I would note that President Barack Obama has deported over 2 million people. Folks never really focus on that. That's why Hillary Clinton has criticized him so much. She's to the left of him on immigration policy. Hers would be much more progressive, much more liberal, much more permissive, really, with open borders. But he has said this week what he has said all along: no amnesty, build the wall, no sanctuary cities, have Mexico pay for the wall, get businesses to sign up for E-Verify, and then what he is saying is, and then find a way to deal with the 11 million or so fairly and humanely.
Fairly and humanely. And when he did that, he actually invoked the policies of Dwight Eisenhower and Operation Wetback, which, if you actually look at the result of the forced deportation under President Eisenhower, it was anything but humane. Also, you mentioned he lauded the enforcement of immigration policy by Presidents Obama and Bush. So it would seem that perhaps he believes things are actually working much better than he has suggested with regard to a cornerstone, again, of his campaign.
Things are working much better than they will under Hillary Clinton. That's the entire point here, which is she would be to the left of President Obama, which is usually hard to do. This is one of those issues where she actually has been critical of President Obama, and where there's just a gulf of difference with she and Mr. Trump. Her open borders policy, her saying catch and release, which basically means you catch somebody who's committing a crime and you just release them. You actually don't. What is that? That's how we get these sanctuary cities. It's how we get innocent people murdered. And Hillary Clinton's going to give a speech today about a website, and Donald Trump spent this week speaking like we are right now to the parents of children who were murdered by illegal immigrants. It's a very serious issue. These people have every right to feel upset that our policies are such that their hearts will never heal. And we have to have an honest conversation about this, but we can't do it when one candidate is out there talking about immigration policy and the other is talking about the other candidate.
I want to ask you and get you out of here on this one. With regard to poll numbers, you've said this, and I quote, "He performs consistently better in online polling where a human being is not talking to another human being about what he or she may do in the election. It's because it's become socially desirable, if you are a college-educated person in the United States of America, to say that you're against Donald Trump," end quote. The optics of that are, if nothing else, it would seem tough, especially for a campaign manager of a presidential candidate whom you're suggesting voters are embarrassed to say they support.
I don't know if there are optics in a statement, but no, what I'm saying is that I can't find a single hidden Hillary Clinton voter in the entire country. They all seem to be out, but there aren't that many of them. There aren't enough of them for her to have really put him away in the 2 weeks where his campaign wasn't doing so well.
But polls suggest that there are more of them than they are supporters of Donald Trump across the board.
The only majority that Hillary Clinton really has is a majority of Americans saying they don't like her and they don't trust her. That's really the only solid majority she can count on. 70% of Americans, including the CBS polling, that say they want to take the country in an entirely different direction. That's not good for Hillary Clinton.
Why are people embarrassed to say that they support Donald Trump to another person?
Because they're so tired of arguing with people, because they're not the usual Republican voters. And so they're so tired of arguing with people in their social circle. They don't want every night to feel like Thanksgiving with the in-laws. And so they're tired of arguing about politics, and their support of Trump because they say, how can you do that? You're a woman. How can you do that? You're Hispanic. How can you do that? You're a laborer. The reason they're voting for him is because they don't much trust or like her. And she represents a system that they think is rigged and corrupt and benefits insiders and hurts the little guy. And with him, they think he speaks the truth. The other thing we hear from voters all the time about Donald Trump, which they can't really articulate necessarily to other people without being yelled at, is that they like the fact that he's brutally honest, he's against political correctness, but also he's doing this for the right reasons. People run for office, political office, usually to get power, to get money, to get status. He has all of that. He's making this big sacrifice, and he's running for the right reasons. You look at the pay to play in the Clinton Foundation, the State Department, you say, wow, Americans are right to feel that most people run for office, or at least Hillary Clinton does, to aggrandize power and status and wealth. And it's different for him.
You mentioned the Clinton Foundation. I want to then ask you, with regard to transparency, I know that you previously believed that Donald Trump should release his tax return, saying that it was an issue of transparency. Why did you change your mind?
Yeah, I did say that in a 6-second soundbite on a different network.
But it's pretty clear.
Because now I'm inside, and I've talked to the lawyers and the accountants who have advised him otherwise, and I have to defer to the professionals. I am a fully recovered lawyer, and I'm not an accountant. I'm certainly not his accountant, and so I have to defer to that. But I think conflating the two, conflating the fact that he has not yet released his tax returns with the drip by drip that we're learning of people just waltzing into our State Department. These people work for us there. We're taxpayers. Our State Department, and using it basically as a concierge for foreign donations, $156 million worth, right, with it by 85 people were showed. I mean, that's very disturbing to many Americans. And I don't want to hear, we don't know if there's a quid pro quo. It doesn't look good for somebody who already is so challenged on truthfulness and likability.
So you're saying it's a question of optics. However, when one does not release their tax returns, it's not just about finding out what tax rate he has, or frankly how much he is worth or perhaps has been paid. Those tax returns also tell us with whom Donald Trump and his corporations do business. It's a campaign that's been dogged by charges of overly chummy connections to foreign governments. Those are optics equally damning.
Well, if that was damning, then I would recommend Hillary Clinton talk about that today, but she's not going to. She's going to talk about a website. That's really weird, I have to say. She's a smart woman. She's got savvy people around her, but we're so into her head now. Trump occupies such serious real estate in Hillary Clinton's head now that she's giving a speech about him, not about us, the voters.
Wish we had more time.
To be continued.
Yeah,
Thank
Kellyanne
you.
Conway, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.